Was I wrong for refusing to ever speak to my family again after they tried to sabotage my entire career by reporting me to the Pentagon, only to have the investigator recognize me from a program so classified that my own relatives had no idea I was literally briefed by the Secretary of Defense himself? I mean, honestly, tell me if you would have done the same thing, because what happened next tore my family apart in ways none of us could have predicted, and I still don't know if I handled it right. My name's irrelevant for this story, but what you need to know is that I work in a field that requires one of the highest security clearances the United States government can grant. I'm talking about the kind of clearance where you can't tell your spouse what you did at work that day, where your office doesn't appear on any public directory, and where the wrong conversation at a dinner party could land you in federal prison. I never planned for this life, honestly. Growing up, I was just a regular kid from a middle-class family in Ohio, the youngest of 3 siblings, and the one everyone assumed would amount to the least. My older brother Marcus went to law school and became a corporate attorney. My sister Jennifer married a doctor and became a stay-at-home mom in the suburbs, and then there was me, the kid who barely graduated high school and joined the military because I didn't know what else to do with my life. But the military changed everything for me. I discovered I had an aptitude for languages, specifically the kind of languages that very few Americans bother to learn, and even fewer can master. I'm talking about Arabic, Farsi Pashto, and a couple of others I can't even mention because their mere existence in my skill set would narrow down exactly what I do. The military put me through intense training, and I excelled in ways that shocked everyone, including myself. I went from being the family's screw-up to being recruited into intelligence work, then into something even more specialized that I legally cannot describe in detail. What I can tell you is that by the time I was 30, I had briefed members of Congress, worked directly with Special Operations Command, and yes, I once sat in a room with the Secretary of Defense going over materials that maybe 200 people in the entire world have ever seen. My family knew none of this. To them, I was just a government worker who traveled a lot and couldn't talk about my job. They knew I had some kind of security clearance because I'd mentioned it in passing once or twice, but they had no concept of what that actually meant or what I actually did. The problems started about 2 years ago during Thanksgiving. My whole family was gathered at my parents' house, and as usual, the conversation turned to careers and accomplishments. Marcus was bragging about some huge case his firm had won, Jennifer was showing off pictures of her daughter's private school achievements, and then the attention turned to me. My mom, bless her heart, asked what she always asks, which is whether I was ever going to get a real job, or if I planned to just work for the government forever, making probably nothing compared to what my siblings earned. I tried to deflect like I always do, saying I was happy with my work and it was fulfilling. But my dad pushed harder. He wanted to know specifics. What did I actually do all day? Why couldn't I talk about it? Was I just embarrassed because it was boring paperwork? He literally said, "Come on, yo, you can tell us. We're family. It's not like we're gonna report you to anyone." The whole table laughed except me. I felt this knot forming in my stomach because I could see where this was heading. My brother Marcus, who'd had a few drinks by this point, decided to pile on. He started making jokes about how I probably just sat in a cubicle filing reports and that the whole classified thing was probably just an excuse the government gave low-level employees to make them feel important. Jennifer joined in, saying it was ridiculous that I couldn't even tell my own family what I did for a living, and that it made family gatherings awkward. I should have just left right then, but I made the mistake of trying to defend myself without revealing anything classified. I said something along the lines of, "Look, what I do is actually important. I've worked on things that have had real national security implications, and I'm not just filing papers in a basement somewhere." That just made Marcus laugh harder. He said, "Oh, so now you're James Bond. Come on, if you were really doing something that important, we'd know about it. The government doesn't just hand out important jobs to people like you. People like me." That phrase stung more than I wanted to admit, because I knew exactly what he meant. I was the one who'd barely made it through high school, who'd joined the military out of desperation, who'd never gone to law school or medical school or any kind of prestigious graduate program. In Marcus's eyes, and probably my whole family's eyes, I was still that screw-up kid who'd just gotten lucky with a government job. I left that Thanksgiving dinner early, and I didn't speak to any of them for about 3 weeks. But then my mom called crying, saying I was tearing the family apart and that I needed to apologize to Marcus for being defensive and ruining the holiday. Apologize to him? I couldn't believe it, but I wanted to keep the peace, so I called Marcus and gave him a half-hearted apology. He accepted it in the most condescending way possible, saying something like, "Hey man, I get it. We all want to feel important at our jobs. I shouldn't have pushed you about it." Things were tense but manageable for the next several months until last spring, when everything exploded in the worst way imaginable. I got a call from my security officer, which is never a good sign, telling me that my clearance was under review and that I needed to come in immediately for a meeting. My heart dropped into my stomach, because a clearance review can mean the end of your career, the end of everything you've worked for. When I got to the office, I was told that someone had filed a complaint with the Department of Defense Inspector General alleging that I had been discussing classified information with unauthorized persons and that I had been behaving erratically and making concerning statements about my work. The complaint was anonymous, but it included specific details about my family structure, my Thanksgiving dinner attendance, and quotes that were pretty damn close to what I'd said at that dinner. It didn't take a genius to figure out who had filed it. My own family had reported me to the Pentagon. Not just reported me, but crafted a complaint designed to make me sound like a security risk, like I was blabbing state secrets at family dinners and having some kind of mental breakdown about my job importance. I was devastated. I was furious. I was terrified. Do you understand what a security clearance investigation entails? They interview everyone you know. They go through your entire life with a microscope. They look at your finances, your relationships, your mental health history, everything. And if they find anything suspicious, or if they think you're unstable, they can revoke your clearance, which means you lose your job, which means your entire career is over. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I spent weeks waiting for the investigation to proceed, knowing that my own family had set this nightmare in motion. The first interview was scheduled for a Tuesday morning at a secure facility I'd been to many times before. I showed up in my suit, prepared to defend myself and my record, and I was led into a conference room where I met the investigator. And this is where the story takes a turn that I still can't quite believe actually happened. The investigator, a senior official from the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, walked into the room, looked at me, and his eyes went wide. He said my name, not my full name, but the operational call sign I'd used on a particular mission that he couldn't possibly have known about unless he'd been read into that specific program. I stared at him, my mind racing, trying to place his face, and it hit me. 3 years earlier, I'd been part of a task force that operated in a location I cannot name, doing work I cannot describe, but this man had been the senior intelligence liaison for that operation. We'd worked in the same compound for 6 months. He'd seen the work I did. He'd been in the room when I'd provided translation and analysis that led to an outcome significant enough that it was personally briefed to the National Security Council. He knew exactly what I did and exactly how classified it was. The investigator, I'll call him Mr. Harrison though that's not his real name, sat down across from me and pulled out the complaint file. He read through it slowly, and I could see this expression forming on his face that was somewhere between disbelief and anger. Finally, he looked up at me and said, "So your family thinks you're lying about the importance of your work and reported you for discussing classified information at Thanksgiving dinner." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without breaking down. "Mr. Harrison closed the file and leaned back in his chair. He said, "I'm going to ask you some questions for the record, but I want you to know that this complaint is nonsense, and I'm going to make sure it's documented as such. The people who filed this have no idea who you are or what you've done for this country." For the next hour, Mr. Harrison conducted what was technically a formal interview, asking me about my family relationships, my statements at Thanksgiving, and whether I'd ever discussed classified information with unauthorized persons. I answered truthfully, explaining that I'd never revealed anything classified, that I'd only defended the importance of my work in the vaguest possible terms, and that my family had no idea what I actually did because I followed operational security protocols to the letter. Mr. Harrison took detailed notes, and then he did something I didn't expect. He told me he was going to include in his report a summary of my work history that would be appropriately classified, but would make it clear to the adjudicators that I was not some low-level employee inflating my importance. He said, "And I'll never forget this. I'm going to make sure they know that you've operated at a level that 99% of cleared personnel will never reach, and that this complaint appears to be the result of family members who are jealous and ignorant of what you actually do." Before the interview ended, Mr. Harrison asked if I wanted to provide any context about why my family might have filed this complaint. I told him the whole story: the Thanksgiving dinner, the mocking, the pressure to reveal what I did, my brother's condescending attitude, all of it. He listened carefully, and then said something that I think about all the time now. He said, "You know, one of the hardest parts of this work is that the people who love us often can't understand what we sacrifice, or why we can't share it with them, and sometimes that ignorance turns into resentment. But what your family did crosses a line. They tried to destroy your career because their egos were bruised. The investigation was closed within 2 weeks with a finding of complaint unfounded, no security concerns identified. My clearance was upheld without any restrictions. I should have felt relieved, but instead, I just felt this overwhelming rage and betrayal. My family had tried to ruin my life, and they'd failed only because I'd happened to get an investigator who personally knew about my work. If it had been anyone else, if it had been a standard investigator who didn't have that context, this could have dragged on for months and potentially ended my career, even if I was eventually cleared. The damage to my reputation and my career trajectory could have been catastrophic. I decided right then that I was done with all of them. I blocked my parents' numbers. I blocked Marcus and Jennifer. I blocked extended family members who might try to reach out on their behalf. I changed my address and didn't tell them where I moved. I removed them from every emergency contact list and every benefit designation. As far as I was concerned, I no longer had a family. About a month after the investigation closed, my mother somehow got through to me using a number I didn't recognize. She was hysterical, crying and saying that Marcus had told her what he'd done, that he'd filed the complaint because he was drunk and angry after another argument we'd had over text about family obligations. She said he never thought it would actually go anywhere, that he just wanted to scare me into being more open with the family. She begged me to forgive him, said he was my brother and he made a mistake. That family was supposed to forgive each other. I listened to her cry for about 5 minutes, and then I said very calmly, "Marcus tried to destroy my career and my life because his ego was hurt. He filed a false complaint with the Department of Defense accusing me of being a security risk. Do you have any idea what he did? Do you understand that he committed a federal crime by filing a false report, and that I could have lost everything?" My mom started making excuses, saying Marcus didn't understand how serious it was, that he was just frustrated, that I needed to be the bigger person. That phrase, "be the bigger person," made me see red. I told her that I'd spent my entire adult life being the bigger person, letting them mock my career, letting them treat me like I was still the screw-up kid, and that I was done. I told her that as far as I was concerned, she could tell Marcus and Jennifer and my dad that they were dead to me, and then I hung up. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice about whether to ever let these people back into my life. Before I tell you what happened next and where things stand now, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have forgiven your family for trying to sabotage your entire career, or would you have cut them off permanently like I did? Because what happened after I cut them off was a whole other nightmare that I didn't see coming. After I hung up on my mom, the family went into full crisis mode. My parents started calling my old friends, my military buddies, anyone they could find who might have a way to contact me. They showed up at my old apartment building, but I'd already moved. Marcus apparently had some kind of breakdown, according to messages that got through to me from a cousin I'd forgotten to block. He was consumed with guilt and fear that I was going to report him for filing a false complaint. Which, let's be honest, I could have done, and he would have faced serious legal consequences. Jennifer took the position that I was being dramatic and that this whole thing was blown out of proportion, that family disagreements happen and I was choosing to end relationships over nothing. The thing is, it wasn't nothing. What they don't understand, what they can't understand because of the nature of my work, is that my security clearance is everything. It's not just a credential, it's my entire profession. Identity. Without it I have no career. The work I do doesn't translate to the civilian sector, because it's so specialized and so classified that I can't even put it on a resume. If I lose my clearance, I lose everything I've spent 15 years building. And they risked all of that because they wanted to feel important, because they wanted me to break the law and violate my oaths, just to satisfy their curiosity. About 6 months after I cut them off, my dad had a heart attack. It wasn't major, but it was serious enough that he was hospitalized for a week. My mom called me from the hospital, left me a voicemail saying that my dad was asking for me, that he wanted to see all his children, that this might be his last chance. I listened to that voicemail 3 times, and each time I felt this war inside myself between the part of me that still loved my father and the part of me that couldn't forgive what they'd done. I didn't go to the hospital. My dad recovered, and according to the family grapevine, he was devastated that I didn't come. But here's the thing that nobody in my family seems to grasp: they broke something that can't be fixed. Trust is everything in my line of work. I trust my colleagues with my life. I trust the system to protect me if I follow the rules. And I trusted my family to be my safe harbor, the one place where I didn't have to be on guard. They shattered that trust in the most fundamental way possible. They weaponized the security apparatus of the United States government against me, because they were embarrassed at a dinner party. How do you come back from that? How do I ever sit at a table with Marcus again, knowing that he was willing to destroy me? How do I hug my mother knowing that she's pressuring me to be the bigger person, instead of demanding that Marcus face consequences for what he did? Fast forward to now, about 2 years after all of this started, and I'm in a weird place emotionally. I've built a new life, a good life. I'm dating someone who has a clearance and understands the lifestyle. I've been promoted twice, and I'm working on programs that are genuinely making a difference in the world. But there's this hole where my family used to be, and I feel it every holiday, every birthday, every major life event. I wonder sometimes if I'm punishing myself as much as I'm punishing them by maintaining this distance. I recently got approached by my cousin Sarah, the one I'd forgotten to block, who's always been kind of the mediator in family disputes. She asked if she could meet me for coffee, and against my better judgment, I agreed. Sarah told me that the family was falling apart, that my parents were depressed, that Marcus was in therapy, and had apparently confessed everything to his wife, who was furious with him, and that Jennifer was finally starting to understand the severity of what had happened. Sarah said that Marcus wanted to apologize to me in person and face whatever consequences I thought were appropriate. She said my parents just wanted to know I was alive and okay. And then Sarah said something that hit me hard. She said, "I get why you're angry, and I think you have every right to be, but you're also slowly killing yourself with this estrangement. I've watched you at family events for years being dismissed and underestimated, and I know it hurt you. But now you have the power, and you're using it to hurt them back, and I don't think it's making you happy." I didn't know how to respond to that, because part of me knows she's right. But another part of me thinks that what I'm doing, isn't about revenge, it's about self-preservation. The aftermath of all this is that I'm still not in contact with my immediate family. I did send a message through Sarah telling my parents that I'm alive and healthy, and that they don't need to worry about me, but that I'm not ready for any kind of reconciliation, and I don't know if I ever will be. I told her to tell Marcus that I'm not going to report him for the false complaint, but that he needs to understand he committed a serious federal offense, and that the only reason he's not facing consequences is because I'm choosing to let it go. Not because what he did was forgivable. And I told Jennifer that her dismissal of the whole situation as drama shows me exactly how little she understands or cares about my life, and that until she can acknowledge the gravity of what happened, we have nothing to say to